Good evening, everyone, and welcome to another edition of State of the Union. I'm Kevin Kimble, your host, founder and CEO of Financial Service Innovation Coalition. And tonight I have two really great guests. Crystal Victoria, founder, CEO of Target Evolution Incorporated, and Thaddaus Dawson, who's the founder, CEO of 10KBA Incorporated and 10KAF. And he'll tell us what all those initials mean as we go through this whole process. But uh, excited to be here tonight. Again, for those of you who watched before and those who are going to watch again, we are on a journey to explore all the different ways in which African Americans, particularly, are trying to make the world a better place. Uh, I spend a lot of time complaining about the state of the world, and people always say, "Well, Kevin, we're tired of hearing about all the complaints. What are solutions?" And I end up saying that what ends up being the case is that people aren't ready for the solutions, they aren't ready for the commitment. And these two people have demonstrated a great deal of commitment to the effort they're undergoing to make lives better for people. So we are going to jump into it. Start with Crystal. And what I'm going to do is let each one just spend a few minutes explaining who they are and what they do. And you'll quickly understand why we're having them on here. So, Crystal, are you there? Go.
I am. How are you tonight? I'm
I'm good.
good. I'm grateful to be here. Thanks for the invite. I'm Crystal Victoria, and I'm the founder of Target Evolution Inc. And primarily, what we do is entrepreneurship education, focused on youth, and more or less for the purpose of economic mobility and improving our communities. So we're turning 15 years old this year and expanding our focus to the entire family. But it's all about economic empowerment through entrepreneurship education, and through the lens of small business.
Awesome. Thaddeus.
Hi, I'm Thaddaus Dawson. Thaddaus Dawson speaks liberation through valuation where soul meets soil. Oh, this isn't my show. I'm sorry. Okay, I'm sorry. I thought
I apologize for Thaddeus's behavior, but
okay.
we
I'm
got to
sorry. I
work with what we
thought
got to
this was
work
my
with on
show,
this show.
Kevin. Okay. I am the founder of 10KBA and 10KAF. The 10KBA Appraisal Foundation, where we started off, we're 10,000 black appraisers, and then it became illegal to be black, so we rebranded to 10KBA, and we were the 10,000 Minority Appraisers Foundation, and we rebranded that as well to the 10,000 Appraisers Foundation. And then I have very long email addresses, so we just cut the initials and the acronyms. And now the B no longer stands for black. It's just 10KBA, just like when Kentucky Fried Chicken went to KFC. So it's just neutral. You can make the B whatever you want it. Big, bold, best. We'll take any of those. But we do appraisal, um, education, appraisal advocacy is where this whole thing started at. And then the 10,000 Appraisers Foundation actually is our training foundation. 10KBA actually does appraisal and reconsideration of value. And reconsideration of value is when you feel like your property has been undervalued, and why that's so important. Or should I just stop? This was just an introduction.
This introduction, I think you guys both have really long stories, right? Because how long? So Crystal's been in business 15 years. How long have you been doing this? I mean, I've known you about 10, 12 years at least.
Well, actually, I've been appraising for 38 years. I know I don't look that old. I started when I was 10, but we started this 10KBA and 10KAF. We'll be 3 years old in June. So
But you before that, you were doing before that when you were 10 years. You've been working on this appraisal modernization process, right?
I worked on. It wasn't an appraisal modernization process. I was a part of another appraisal organization that advocated or was supposed to be advocating for folks, and I was I was the Georgia State chapter president for probably the last 15 years, and I was the second national vice president for probably 10 or 12 years. But I was frustrated with the efforts and what was going on, and so I decided to start another organization. So that's how I ended up here.
Got it. All right. So that's quick background. So we're going to start with Crystal again. Go back to Crystal. When you jumped into this space, right? You saw a need and you started working on it. Tell me a little bit about your journey. Like, 'cause again, inevitably, I think when I prep both of y'all when we were having this conversation, what we find is that everyone thinks this is easy. Like they think they're going to jump in to do some kind of change. And I'm trying to explain to people that it takes a lot of dedication, a lot of suffering, and usually you make very little money doing this thing. So talk about your 15-year journey. You will do your whole thing, but explain to people how you got here and how much struggle you had to do. And then that is, you can do the same.
Sure. So no, this journey hasn't been easy. It's been rewarding in many other ways, and at times financially, at times very lucrative. However, what I chose to do is to dominate a space that's largely experiential, and I think create multiple pieces along the way. So 15 years ago when I started, I always wanted, what I wanted to do at the time, I'll say that, was to build an entrepreneurship school. And, obviously it was a great concept. The logistics is what took it longer than I anticipated and was expensive and quite painful. Quite painful. I will not lie. There were times that I was questioning all my life decisions, but ultimately, looking back, what I think that I've learned through all of that is the power of being patient and giving yourself time to pivot and transition as necessary. So we've always been entrepreneurship, education focused. We've always been focused on youth. And learning how to take the big vision that was going to cost $5 or $10 million to execute and scale that thing down to the most minute version is what ended up being the thing that led me to ultimately being successful and being in the position we are now. So, it was like the idea, do an entrepreneurship school. Okay. Yeah. And then when that plan, I would say, needed to change and take a little different pathway, allowing myself, as well as, communicating with those around me, that we were at a point that we needed to just reevaluate the how. It was never a matter of if or not to. It was just how we do this is going to look very different. And, before I knew it, 10 years had gone by. But, in that time, it has been a series of testing and putting together small pieces of this larger puzzle, and being really good at the little pieces and compounding that, doing that, multiple times over, in those pieces that were established in the beginning, over time becoming more valuable and helping to put this entire bigger thing together. So it started as when I looked at how do I scale this down, because going and getting venture funding or investment capital was a lot more challenging, getting this down to the minimum viable product. Right. And we started with a college textbook, with a workbook. And, the book turned into a camp, and then the camp turned into a pop-up shop in the back of the store during the holidays. Right. And then the pop-up shop turned into a 3,000 square foot inline in the Galleria of Houston, which turned into a partnership with Macy's and then Brookfield. And now we're doing bigger things in the space and have the opportunity to transform retail in a very unique and innovative way. And it's still entrepreneurship education. And it's funny because it does kind of resemble a school, but it's not. It's an incubator. Right. But my point of this and why I shared all of this was the vision was big. It was big from the beginning. But how it got accomplished had to change, and so did I at certain points. And those are the things that I don't think a business plan teaches you. Those are things that you learn through experience. And if I could do it again, I think I would have started with the perspective that it would take me 10 or 15 years instead of hoping for a win in 5.
Right.
Giving myself more time. And like I said, being more patient. So that's the story in a nutshell. I know that's kind of the long version.
I know. I mean, you boil 15 years into about 2.5 minutes. That's pretty good. So that's the time to beat that. But and again, with both of you guys, I have every time I do on these shows, I'm very lucky. I get this. Well, Thaddaus case maybe not so lucky, but I get to spend as much time talking to really cool people like you who are doing really cool things, right? And so it's really fun for me to share with the audience, because either people think that it can't be done, or that someone's doing it, or that no one's doing enough. And so this is always really interesting because it takes a lot. So Thaddaus, do your piece, and you can tie. Because I'm gonna come back to Chris on this. You actually got a MOU with the federal government a couple of years ago. Like Department of Labor made you an apprenticeship program through this whole process. So go back a few years before that and work our way forward. 2.5 minutes. Go.
Oh man, Chris will get 15 minutes. I guess because she's been in business 15 years. So since I only been in business 2.5, well, this organization only been around 2.5 years. We only get 2.5 minutes. So I'm gonna go ahead and jump in there. Crystal, congratulations, and I'm really proud of you and the work that you've been able to do. And I know what it takes, and all of the obstacles, and all of the vultures are out there, pirates smiling in your face, and then trying to claim your work or claim your idea, especially if you are in a position to start making money. Everybody wants to shine and nobody wants to grind. So hats off to you. We started in advocacy doing reconsideration of value in 2022, or a guy that everybody refers to it as appraisal bias. I don't particularly like using appraisal bias because it's been used ad nauseum. I like to refer to it as systemic undervaluation that disproportionately impacts Black folks. That seems a little less offensive to my appraisal family. Nobody ever wants to have any accountability in what their role is. But at the minute you start talking bias, people shut down and stop listening. So we did a case in Cincinnati for a guy named Terry Horton, and I was doing a lot of work at the time with the National Community Reinvestment Coalition. They picked up the case, seen its merit. They referred it to HUD and the Justice Department, and it's still pending today. Now that those organizations are not really pursuing those cases, I don't know what the result or outcome will be. But once the New York Times ran a story on that case, I start getting a lot of requests from across the country to look at it, investigate. And so what I initially thought was a Black problem, which it is, but it's a disproportionately Black. There's an appraisal industry-wide problem on several fronts. And why reconsideration of value is so important is because right now we are currently going through the largest transformation of wealth in history, $106 trillion. And Black people are participating in less than $3 trillion of that. And that number should be closer to 12 to 15. And part of that is lots of reasons, but there's been a lot of intentionality towards the Black community on that front. If you look at the redlining, you can start with the redlining with HUD. Then you can look into the disinvestment from the banking community. Then you can look at the Federal Highway and Transportation Department intentionally breaking up over 1,260 Black communities across the country. You can pivot that over to the CIA dropping drugs into the Black community, and then you can move there and go to the FBI disenfranchising black leaders in the black community. You can pivot over to the EPA, where over 70% of all black communities are environmentally contaminated. You can go to the USDA and the FSA for the farming and rural communities. So all of these have been intentional and have direct impact on valuation, which causes a compound effect of external obsolescence. So that part is the part that nobody talks about, and it's perpetuated. It shows up as appraisal bias, but then again, that rationale again it gets back to systemic undervaluation. But the other part is the industry is outdated. So we just updated the appraisal form to 3.6, and that started in January, and it won't become fully effective supposedly until November. But prior to that, the form hadn't been updated in 20 years. So just think about how many phones you've had since Apple's on what 17 now, and the appraisal form just changed. But even with the form changing, the methodology hasn't changed. So the methodology is outdated and antiquated. And so you're using analog methodology where you should be using um, smart technology. And that's the part of the big reason why there's such a disparity. But why it disproportionately impacts black communities is because over 65% of all black people's wealth is in real estate. And then over 70% of black people do not have wills or trusts. So now you're already behind and you're not able to transfer. If you do, you create a situation that causes heirs property. That's HEIRS, not AIRS. So I want to say that up front because we tend to lose people and think we're talking about heir rights. So this is what reconsideration of value does is allows the aggrieving party to be heard. But then at the same time, you don't accuse the appraiser of bias. But you have to be able to articulate the argument so that it's objective. And it's the number one tool in further eroding the valuation of property and the wealth gap.
Okay.
Was that my 2.5 minutes up?
Yeah, that was your 2.5 minutes. And you got off. You got off. I want to come back to the advocacy part on the heirs property, and the appraisal reevaluation. But I want to talk about the workforce part, the BA part of the or the AF part of the found of your portfolio.
Okay, so the other part of it is there's not enough representation in the space. It's been a very closed off, nepotistic space, and because it's been closed off, the appraisers have closed themselves off to almost extinction and exclusivity. So there's probably today around 65,000 appraisers. Over 80% of all appraisers are over 65 years old, and less than 7% are under 35. And there's no pipeline to replace them. And so, and on top of that, what's being taught is outdated. So that we are trying to modernize the process with evidence-based, data-driven analysis led by data science. This will eliminate the comparable sales issue and take hold of the market. Now, why this is significant? Well, let me go another. The appraisal qualifications board is now trying to implement and lower the standards for appraising. So you only need a high school diploma. They think that is the answer to solving the lack of appraisers. Well, that's probably not the way to go because in this modernization process, they have what's called data collectors that can go out and measure and take pictures of a house. So you want to start there as a way of entry and workforce. But on the other side of that is FHFA did a paper in 2024 that said only 10% of all appraisals utilize market conditions adjustments. Well, if only 10% is utilizing market conditions adjustments, that means 90% of appraisals do not use market conditions adjustments. And that's with existing appraisers. So that tells me that the appraisers are not trained and they're not applying it properly. And I'm going to give you one guess on who those that those lack of market conditions adjustments disproportionately impact black and brown people. And
So, uh, so I'm gonna before this turns totally into the real estate appraisal valuation show, which it could totally, but and I'm gonna pitch this later. We're gonna have this conversation at the summit. So in February 25th through the 27th, we're having our annual economic policy summit in DC. That's going to be there talking about this. So and Chris will be. I think Chris, you're coming too this year to speak. There's a flyer. We'll talk about it a little bit more later. But what the reason I patched you two together. There's a reason why. I mean, there's always a method to the madness here. We'll have put both of you guys have very functional projects, right? They're both business, like you're doing a business, but you also have the workforce component, right? And our kid, like the youth, like Thaddaus, you just did the thing about the transfer of property, 106 trillion to 5 trillion for Black people, which is less than 1%, right? We have less than 1%.
3 trillion.
No, 3 trillion. So we have less than 1% of all contracts, wealth is across the board. And Krista, I remember once, and this is where the advocacy and the innovation comes in. When you were working, because you've got a contract, you've gotten some contracts through government, like So talk a little bit about that process and where you've gotten. And I want to talk about the one where I remember you had to redo the contract so you could add transportation to the because you couldn't get any people. So let's talk about that a little bit, because I thought that was interesting.
Yeah. So that's been an interesting part of the journey. And I'm grateful that it was our government contracts that really turned up the volume on our ability to put entrepreneurship education in a retail type setting and make it more experiential. And so it really started, and that entire, I would say, conversation and the desire for the government to be willing to do that came from a white paper that I wrote on the effects of alternative work environments, or we know it as gig work, but from a government classification attempt, we'll say it like that, it was considered contingent work arrangements or alternative work. And, my goal was to, encourage a higher spending of government contracts to go towards entrepreneurship endeavors, but for them to include multiple resources. So to go beyond training, what makes us unique in one of the best in this particular field of study, I'd say, is the fact that the amount of research and evaluations that went into designing the program overall. And so, there's lots of economic studying that's going on. And so I wrote this white paper that the workforce board thought was great. And they eventually issued a proposal for this specific entrepreneurship type of education, done in the way that I designed it, with a retail store attached, where people would not only learn about business. There is an outlet, focused on kids at first. We tested this multiple times with kids, ages 8 to 24. 24 is our cap. And putting them in a retail environment, we are testing out just really, how does it work? We know it works. We know kids love the mall, right? And, from this white paper, I did a pop-up in the Galleria Houston. And Workforce in Dallas wanted us to duplicate that same concept in Dallas. And then we got one contract for just Dallas, and then we got the Dallas contract again, and Workforce Solutions North Central Texas, which was the 14 counties around Dallas. We had Dallas and 14 surrounding counties. And then we were based in Houston, so we were working on that. And, I have some experience with, with someone who I would say growing too fast came with a lot of challenges, especially in this new space, and especially adding technically another type of business to a nonprofit that's already education. It's like three different business models in one. And the team that I needed, grateful that I had people like Kevin on my board. I had a pretty good sized board. And the level of time and investment that it took for my team, for the team around this to lift this and carry it through COVID was insane. I look back at that time and I think, wow, that was interesting. Our retail part of our program opened December 2019. And then 4 months later, right as we get into our own space, the world shuts down. But more importantly, as we got more contracts, we expanded, and it was a good thing because it got us a lot of attention. There's a lot of partnerships that we were able to acquire because we're in multiple cities, and then managing the contracts was a little more challenging. And then the type of contracts, and it really kind of forced us into an evaluation place where we started having to ask and request funding for things that at the end of the day, began feeling like we really need to go back to our core business. We're doing way too much. We've got to add money for Uber rides, so we got to get Uber. Okay, you know what? It was so much easier to focus on youth who had the support of parents. When we expanded beyond age 21 to 24, that just really, although, at the time it wasn't a fit. We couldn't make all of the pieces work. So, although we did the last contracts, I left a lot of money on the table when I walked away from it, because, and I had to, for the core sake of the mission I was trying to accomplish. Here's the difference. Here's what that looks like when you don't have the discipline to do something like that. You end up taking money to create programs and do things that you really at the core don't do and aren't really good at, and you're taking it away from an organization that really is and it deserves the money that you could probably partner with if you wanted to incorporate that. I didn't want us to go too far into having to provide full wraparound services yet. And I felt like it's something we can add, but how we do it needs to be strategic, because when someone's whole life is in your hands as a program, and you have to take that on, because we had those type of government contracts, it really, really forced, I think us to look at what we're building versus what we're being asked to build and say, what can we realistically do right now? And let's focus on get that right, and we can add the other things later. And I think, like I said, now here it is, it's 6 years later and 6 stores and a lot of other amazing changes, we're able to take on more. But, for me, in my opinion, the key to not only getting those government contracts, but making them work, is to build a stable, solid program underneath it as the foundation where it stands with or without them. And I think that, if organizations are not savvy in how they choose to design their program structures, then what happens is you end up dependent on those government contracts and reaching for more and more of them. And the truth is, you can build sustainable revenue streams. I believe this. I believe you can build sustainable revenue streams under your nonprofit.
Crystal, can I jump in there real quick?
Sure.
First of all, I super applaud you for the pivot. We were forced to pivot. We were looking for some grants that never happened for us. And now I'm working on contracts, providing the road services, doing teaching and speaking and being paid, except for when I'm speaking for Kevin, and then other things to generate revenue with appraisal contracts. So the whole goal is to teach people how to fish for themselves. But one of the things that you said that really resonated with my heart is the wraparound services. It's so hard to help people that don't have a foundation to be able to help. And you end up exhausting so many resources
Mhm.
just to even. It's so hard for people to just show up.
The work,
Yeah.
They have so many life
That
challenges.
need the help.
And
You gotta almost make them hold their hand and make them do it. And this is not to shame the help, but I agree.
no.
no, not at all. It's very problematic, but it just it everything you said struck a chord. And so me only being 2.5 years old and you being 15, the ability to pivot and transition just for your own survival is critical. And I don't think people understand the level of commitment and sacrifice that it takes to do that. Because I don't know about you, but I tell folks all the time, I cannot tell you how many times I have thrown the towel in. And every time I throw it in, God throws it back and tells me I'm not done.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
I want to quit. I promise you. I don't want to be out here doing this. My life was pretty good before this.
I feel there's a lot of days I'm like, ooh, I could do so many other things. I also have written and published 8 books. So, there's been times I'm like, why don't I just be a published author? Because I really, and there's a quote that says, it's easy to make $1. It's a lot harder to make a difference.
Yes.
And,
I hope you don't mind if you hear me say that somewhere. I'll give you
no, it's
credit
not my
for
quote.
it.
I think it's Ben Franklin or something.
Oh, okay.
I'd have to look. I'm almost sure that's who it is, but it is so true. I really had to learn again the power of having healthy boundaries around what's good for my mental health as a founder as well. And again, there are certain things that I think all organizations instinctively want to do. If you're a good person, you have a good heart, there's things you want to do. And there might even be a little dangle of funding for it. But it's like, don't go doing everything because it's offered or because it's there.
Yeah.
Choose a lane you're really good at. Like you mentioned, being an appraisal. And I think that's so unique. In fact, everything that you were saying, I hadn't even heard of someone doing. And I'm thinking to myself, oh, that's really good. But I also love the fact that you've been focused on that, I believe that there's power in their ability to focus. Again, there was times we were asked to expand to adults a long time ago, parents requested stuff. And I'm like, in time, we will get to all those things in time. And again, any entrepreneurs, I would just say maybe it goes a little faster now with AI, but at least plan for 10 years. And I've been really focused on living my life like that beyond just the business. I plan my life in decades now.
So at what year did that happen? Because I ain't got there yet.
I plan 50 to 100 years. And people, I have a 100-year business plan for this.
So at what year did you start giving boundaries to yourself and not working 24/7?
Oh man. So around 2022.
What year
So
was
about
that?
12 years or 12, 13 years?
That was what, 20, this is 2026. We're at 15, 4 years ago. So 11, about a year, 11.
Shit.
I was like, and really it should have started before then because I personally moved to Houston and we had programs going on in Houston and Dallas. And there were times, and then we had stores in both cities. And although I had a good team, we were still growing and I was going through these learning curves and growing pains. And there were times that I was just back and forth between Dallas and Houston way more than I would have liked. The only reason I feel like I even was able to make it this far is because I made some very, very hard, I'll say, sacrifices very early on. Like I chose not to have kids. I chose to remain single. It's like I became very married to the results of the work that I do. Even at some point, what was interesting that kicked in is I was more in love with the results and the outcomes of what we do than my idea and how it should be done. And I think that's a beautiful place to be because that's what made the pivots even easier. It's like, get the work accomplished and don't just do it. Be the best at it. Be very good at it because now I'm justified in every dollar I charge. Okay. Yeah. And I mean, when I take on contracts or when we do something, they are top dollar. Like we are, at that phase where, like I said, I didn't just seek to do something. and to just be good. I had a high standard of excellence, and I'm grateful that, and again, some very hard decisions I made, it's reflected in the business that I've built. More of the business than my even personal brand and my own ego. Yeah, I have 8 books, but when I'm out talking, I'm talking about Target Evolution and what we do for youth in the communities and entrepreneurship education. So there's that.
Can you separate you from your work or no?
So
or are you your work?
At times I am, at times I'm not. I would
I'm going to jump in. I'm going to say because I get to talk to lots of y'all, right? I get to talk to lots of y'all.
And I talk to Kevin a lot.
Yeah. And so but I've never met anyone who's doing this type of work who isn't totally committed to it. Like, this work is who they are. I mean, I can speak personally, having known Christopher a lot of this process. Target Evolution is a part of her. I mean, it comes out of who she is. It's like she birthed a baby through this. And same with you and Thaddaus, you and 10KBA. I mean, I remember when we were talking about real estate appraisal discrimination on the Hill, 13 years and 14 years ago. Like, we were going around talking. I mean, this is like, you birthed this process. So I don't think there's a way to separate it from who you are.
But like Crystal, I think you eat it, you breathe it, you sleep it. It won't let you rest. And one of those things that I always say, that God never gives you, I don't say it, my pastor used to say it, God never gives you a vision without making a provision. But then one of my other friends said, he also won't, if you got that vision, it doesn't allow you to sleep. So sometimes you wake up in the middle of the night and start writing. And you got 8 books, Crystal. I'm struggling trying to get this one under my belt. And Kevin and Bill and a few other people have been pushing me to write a book. So I've had all these notes and pieces and parcels. And now I'm spending time focusing, trying to get that out of the door to utilize it for heirs property training before we start traveling again in April.
Awesome.
I might need you to get a read and an edit in there for me.
Let me ask you both a question about the kids. So a lot of this is about the future. I mean, the property part, that is good, but the work you do trying to get kids jobs, and because we all do work in workforce development to a certain degree through part of our business models. It seems there's such a lack of resources dedicated. Chris, we're talking about wraparound services. Like, our kids can't get ahead because they can't get into programs, because they can't meet all the criteria. They don't have the resources. What policy change would you, when we do the summit, what policy change should we be recommending that can make this a lot easier for other people?
It's a great question. And here's my answer. And I hope in our later decade, we got 10 years of retail. So this is not coming up before 10 years from now. But in 10 years from now, I see us in the future making another pivot to add housing. Mm-hmm. Housing is the thing that a housing in a car, where the two kind of, what I would say, the two dominoes that fell in that knocked all of them down when we were working with ages above 19 to 24. It's like a young person would lose their car or something, and then they lose their job, and then they lose their house, and if they got kids, and it's just like everything spirals. And it's like, you're at best, what we're doing is providing a program for you to come, which adds to what you already have to do, especially if you have to work and you have kids. Now you have to go take this class too. And what I think would have made it easier was to add some kind of housing strategy or something for people when they are involved in a workforce program that's workforce funded. Transportation, I know that there is I think they have allocations for that. That's already like kind of law. But based on my understanding from Workforce Solutions in Dallas, is that there is no workforce resources that include some kind of housing, anything. That's, would come from, the housing authorities.
Mm-hmm.
And those are two different government buckets, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But I wish there was a way, and again, this is a wish, that housing could be added, some kind of housing subsidy for people who are in some kind of training program, period.
Crystal, did they do that in the Job Corps model?
Yes. So, and then, that got severely disrupted last year. And Job Corps is, I would say, a great place to put it. However, I would almost argue that the challenge with Job Corps is it's kind of restrictive in that if you live on campus, like if you're in the program, you have to stay there on campus for everything. Their ability to move around, the mobility is kind of missing, right? And so it would be nice to have smaller formats of that with, housing associated that allows people to stay anywhere so that the program can be anywhere. Because in Texas, it was way out in McKinney, in North McKinney, out there where nothing really is. So it's kind of like, I don't know where all of them are located, but yes, Tish, the short answer to your question is yes.
So Job Corps, the problem with Job Corps is once you're out of Job Corps, they give you $1,000 and send you on your way. And so most people can't transit. Like when we did a workforce program in North Carolina, when the kids graduated from this program, we had to get them an Airbnb at the job site for 2 weeks till they got the first paycheck, right? I mean, you couldn't just do that. So we heard of Job Corps graduates who couldn't keep their jobs because they couldn't afford either to live in the area or get transportation. Working at CVS or Marriott wasn't going to let them survive in most places. So the supplementing, like same thing when kids graduate from the foster care, age out of foster care, there's no transitional money to help them go to the next level. So I think
one of the good things that we did was we had 21 student internships in 2024 and 2025 with the U.S. Forest Service. And so a couple of those students also came from Job Corps. What they used to do was be able to transition folks into government jobs, which was great. And so they could have careers. I don't know what that footprint looks like now because they were understaffed over the last couple of years. And now between retirement and attrition, they're way understaffed. So at some point, where do the jobs go or who is going to be working in those particular spaces? But Crystal, to your point, I just like the Job Corps is the housing was more focused. So if you at work and you on campus, you don't need to go nowhere until you finish. And then once you get your skill set, then we could work on giving you some funding for transitional housing or a stipend. But housing was so expensive. That was one of the most expensive parts for us these last couple of years. But we, Mr. York did a fantastic job with logistics across the country, placing folks to be able to get the most out of it.
Awesome. And you're right. Housing is expensive. And so, and I'm glad you brought that up because this gives me the chance to kind of gauge on something and as I think about this, and this is just, I'm just going to put out a idea, float some ideas out and see, what happens as a result. But I think there is a way. The last couple years, or really since I opened these stores, since I started with the inlines, which our first inline opened in 2020, commercial real estate has now become a fundamental part of everything else that we had to learn and that I've had to really take an intense interest in.
Well, you got a resource in me, Crystal. So, I mean, just hit the button,
So, and I appreciate that because as I look at these malls, because our stores and our incubators, I have to stop calling them stores because they're not stores anymore. They're incubators, but our incubators are located in shopping malls. And so revitalizing the traditional indoor shopping mall has been kind of like, it's become, I would say the focus has gotten larger and sharper over the last 6 years. And so, with learning how malls work, studying and then being trained by one of the biggest mall owners in the country, again, real estate and how many ways we can make things work has become one of my kind of core obsessions. And I think I've figured out some strategies. So, like I said, something that's not quite Job Corp, that works. I would say that more kids can participate in, and that's probably that would be not, maybe even more attractive. Revitalizing an old mall, and having retail that's a part of it, and then that is also like a wing, like an old Macy's or something, that's housing. And even maybe making half a housing boutique hotel. You're talking about like a whole mixed use development. And that's something that's, like I said, it's got retail, therefore it's got restaurants.
Developers will be calling you from all over the country because retail has really been struggling with the advent of Amazon and different opportunities. So you're looking at transitional use, highest and best use. Folks have long-term leases people are walking away from. There was a while there where regional, not necessarily malls, but big box retail was being converted into churches.
Yes.
So you can also add another component to that with food sovereignty in urban farms with aquaponics, hydroponics, and you can use old malls for that and be able to produce food sovereignty and food quality. Like I always tell people, you can't focus on building wealth when your belly touching your back. So that could also be another part of your retail component. Not to jump in there, but you are onto something. So, of course, Kevin is looking like the brain because he put us together, but he said he knew that was what he was doing anyway.
It was just all purposeful. Here, and I'm gonna add one more thing to your little conversation. Opportunity zones are being. I hate opportunity zones at the core, but between the two of y'all with what you're doing, you should consider starting your own opportunity fund, right? Because then if you ever find an opportunity, a person with capital gains that they want to invest, you're in a position to get them to invest in your opportunity fund, could then fund this little project you guys just discussed.
Yes. So I've got the retail piece mapped out. I'll just say that. What I don't have is the housing piece, because like I said, I wasn't even trying to think about it for about 10 years. I was like, okay, that's great. Mental check. Got focus, refocus, make yourself focus here. You got to focus right here, right? But for you having an appraisal background, that's what brought it to mind. Like, I really wonder what our incubator concepts, property value could be worth. And, I'd love a feasibility study around it that includes appraisal, like if we picked out a plot of land. Appraisals and inspections, property inspections, are the two things I will say is my weak point. Everything else when it comes to the commercial real estate development process, from, brokering the lease, don't broker the lease, but finding the space, evaluating the demographics around it, market value comps, and then really moving into securing it and to operations and building the pre-construction, managing the construction of the project, and then setting up as an incubator. I can do all of those things. There's just two little things and I don't need to learn those things. So you
got people that knows everybody got to stay in their lane, like you said earlier.
Exactly.
So that market analysis is huge.
Yes. And again, I know a little bit about a few things, but like I said, you got to take the time span it took for me to learn all this. It was not an overnight process. And so I'm still new to commercial real estate, but I do love the opportunity. And I also see that it's another space in which there's not a lot of us represented. We are all over residential real estate, as it relates to the African-American community, but commercial real estate, warehouses, storages, malls. In fact, shopping centers right now is getting ready to hit, I would say maybe a challenge, because because of AI, we're going to see a surge, and we're already seeing it, of people returning to brick and mortar retail. And what's going to happen is, when everybody is more focused on going in the store, then all these e-commerce creators and e-commerce businesses now need space. All right. And so it's actually undeveloped as it relates to shopping center development in the United States. So converting these big box retailers, a lot of them are going out of business. There's going to have to be some really creative uses for commercial retail real estate. And I think that, what we are building is one of those solutions. And the bigger we can go with it, the better, because malls are huge and they are going to survive, but the best ones, only the best ones. I think that some of the lower performing malls will continue to decline, but it's more or less because we need smaller format properties. And what that looks like as it relates to the building is what I would like to be challenged, the next kind of piece of the challenge, right?
Let me throw this into your entrepreneurial hat there. Because if you're an entrepreneur and you're in a small retail space, you're going to be spending a lot of time in your space. So have living space attached to your retail space, like living above your store. So,
yeah, Dallas has done some really unique things with that concept over in South Dallas. All right. Mm-hmm. And I think the only challenge about what they did, although it was a really great initiative, and I have to give Dallas County credit for that, City of Dallas, is I feel like location is a problem. You put retail stores on a street in a community that doesn't have any money to support that kind of activity. Mm-hmm. If they were in a different part of town, which is why I put our students in our incubators, in our previous stores, were always in luxury, high-class malls. High traffic locations, because the goal is for them to make money. And if they can't make money, I had to kind of learn how to balance when foot traffic is most important or owning the space. I think sometimes if you get too wrapped up in the need to own a space prematurely, then you'll miss out on the power and the magic of paying a little bit more for it and just trading that in exchange for the foot traffic, because you need attention. And that money can also, you also reduce your marketing budget, which should be able to cover for the extra amount of rent you're going to pay. And so, like I said, those concepts work when they are in locations that support, good traffic, that are safe, where the community around it can afford to support it. I said at one point, we're not Robin Hood, I'm Robin Good. And at the same time, I'm not robbing anybody. But, conceptually, how Robin Hood would steal from the rich to get to the poor. I'm like, no, we put our incubators over there in their communities. We're just going to sell them something. Okay. Mm-hmm. They're going to come in and buy from us. And those kids are able to take that to whatever community that they want. But I think, like I said, being strategic in how we look at and where we look at spaces, opportunity zones are great, but it's like, if we need spaces that have traffic, so that when you put a retail space there for them to sell and you put their house in behind it, that store makes enough money for them to pay some bills, right?
Well, most opportunity zones, right, they're not desolate. They're not like most of the last version of opportunity zones. Downtown Portland was an opportunity zone. Right? And so it just depends. Yeah. So it depends. We're not talking about enterprise zones, which is that's a different function. So it depends. But to your point, and to that point, every state has to redraw their opportunity zones, right? So as you're thinking about where you want your properties, you should be lobbying your legislator to make sure that you get zoned into an opportunity zone.
Done. Thank you. Thanks for letting me know. And I mean, like I said, it might be motels, but putting them and making sure they're in places where there is, main roads and a decent degree of daily, even driver traffic. If you can't get foot traffic, you need driver traffic. I personally prefer foot traffic because obviously we can reach out and talk to people, right? They're right there. In the car, I can't reach out and talk to you, right? So, like I said, for us, malls has been the strategy, but I think that our position and just being in close proximity and being able to work with executives from Brookfield Properties, which is now GGP, and they're the second largest mall owner in the world. They own 160 shopping malls nationwide. I think that there's going to be some unique opportunity in commercial real estate over the next 5 years. And I think it would behoove us as African Americans and Black people to get in on the building and getting these spaces, acquiring them, because this I would say e-commerce to brick and mortar pipeline, that is just about to be a trend and a shift, and there is not enough retail space to capture the vast majority of people that are going to need it. And the other leap for them is they really don't need to make that leap. They're going, it's probably not even really feasible for them. In some cases, you're building out $100,000 space and you're taking on a triple net lease that may cost you $10,000. So how, our ability to, create unique environments and environmental retail spaces, like what we're doing in Incubator, and owning the property that they sit on, right, what I would see is going to be a unique real estate strategy for the Black community. If people can pull their funds together and help acquire this real estate that right now is pretty, is a lot of it on the market because of the decline in major big box retail. I think that, if enough Black people can pull together their funds and buy up shopping centers, I think in the next 5 years, we'd be surprised about where that leads.
So, Crystal, on my radio show today, we talked about tokenization of real estate. And I think what the tokenization and the blockchain will enable people to do is buy fractional interest in development with smart contracts. And so it's a financing for the future with decentralized financing. And you don't have to worry about going to the bank. And people are able to pool their money and their resources. So developing crowdfunding within the community. Everybody is not broke. And so folks get an opportunity to be able to invest. And with the blockchain, you don't have to worry about what your interests actually are. And you're able to quantify, but also with the smart contract, you're able to see it in real time with transparency.
Awesome. Yeah. And we're going to have to be creative in how we finance it, because we all know that, when you're working with certain communities, the money isn't as free flowing, but that's the goal. And this is why I said, it is important to be strategic about how we fund these initiatives, because we know that grants and contracts and some of that is not going to be in our best interest. So we have to build, I think the way for us to navigate through that is to figure out how to make our missions, our nonprofits, more sustainable without that money. Mm-hmm. We might not get it. And then if you get it and then it goes away, then what? Right. Mm-hmm. And we all get tired of galas and fundraisers and double good popcorn. I mean, some things we got to just leave for the kids to do, right? And I think that, again, there's going to be a way, especially, like I said, nonprofits powering together. I think that there's going to be a very unique way to keep, again, communities funded in these good initiatives that we're doing for the communities that need it most, well-funded, without having to constantly worrying about what foundation is going to give or not. Or that's at least the place of sustainability that I am aiming for us to be securely in by the end of this year.
I think crowdfunding using Bitcoin and decentralization. Mm-hmm. And therefore, you're not dependent upon the banking system. And it's self-funding and it's self-sustaining. And it's decentralized.
So you're going to create your own token. You're going to create a 10K BA.
You can use existing tokens, or you can create tokens, but you want to use something that's going to be substantive and transparent. And there's already, if you look last week, BlackRock wrote an article about tokenizing the whole real estate industry, $630 trillion. Mm-hmm. And if they tokenize 10% of that, that's $63 trillion. It's already happening. The point is, where we are we going to be able to participate, or are we going to be playing catch up from behind? Because the other thing, once you get locked in with these smart contracts, now that undervaluation is going to be permanent. And it's going to make the wealth gap even further.
Wow. Well, guys, it's 9 o'clock. Well, 8 o'clock where you are, Crystal, but we've done an hour. We could easily do another hour. So I appreciate you guys taking the time. Someone in the chat has said, how can they contact you? I'll have Tracy will put up your websites again so people can see it and reach out to you guys. Your wealth of knowledge and resources and inspiration
Crystal, I got to get you to commit to coming on to my radio show and podcast. I got to get you on.
Sure, I'm
We
happy.
record on Wednesdays and Sundays, so I need to make sure I get your contact information, and I want to reach out to you.
You guys are connected via text. So
I think so. Yeah, I'll text you my info. Kevin.
Okay.
I appreciate the opportunity.
And then I'll see you both at the summit.
Okay.
Are you gonna have us in those little 5x5 sleeping rooms again?
If you're lucky, or outside on the streets, and the real estate's at a premium. We got some tents and porta potties this year. You're all good.
Well, I'm looking forward to seeing you in DC, Crystal.
You too.
All right, guys.
Thanks for having us on, Kevin.
Thanks for listening, guys. Bye.